Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Planet X News. This is Scott from the Nibiru channel. I'm here this afternoon with our physicist and also Chris Potter. How are both of you today?
Very well, thanks, Scott. And you?
Doing well.
Yeah, I'm not doing too bad. I know there's a lot of things going on right now on the East Coast of the United States with this whole entire, I think it's a psychological operation that they're putting forth, this Operation Gotham Shield. And from a lot of the information that we've been uncovering, there is a very, very, very high possibility that this has absolutely nothing to do with a nuclear strike exercise and all of these federal and state and local agencies taking part in. There is a huge possibility that this has something to do with a solar event coming from our sun. Now, a lot of you, ladies and gentlemen, that have been listening to our channels, you know that we've been reporting on these instances where the sun is just basically going haywire. And right now, the sun is supposed to be in what they call a grand solar minimum. But in actuality, it seems like the sun is not at a minimum, but at a maximum, because there's a lot of things going on right now dealing with the sun and our inner solar system that could be very life-threatening to humanity. Now, we had these power outages that were all over the media, and that was in New York, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. But what we weren't told is that there were power outages all around the world, And I'm finding out that there was a power outage in Florida. I don't know if it was yesterday or the day of the power outages in New York and out on the West Coast, but this shut down the entire banking system in Florida. So that's why I mentioned, ladies and gentlemen, you know, going into this Operation Gotham Shield, you know, I would suggest that you definitely have yourself prepared for something, and make sure you have some cash, some money on you, because if the electrical grid goes out, the banking system goes bye-bye. And so does the use of debit cards and credit cards. So you will have no access to your money. So let that be a warning. Now, we're going to be getting into all kinds of information here today. And I do want to start off with saying that over the course of the last month or so, our doctor of physics, our professor, you know, she has been criticized by, well, really criticized by nobody other than the trolls for not publishing all of her papers that she has written on the sun, planet X, and these brown dwarf stars. And we had mentioned before that the reason why she wasn't publishing this information is because she was working with Chris Potter and now working with me and Chris. And these reports are meant to be in general terms, so it's easy to explain to all of you. So it just so happens that the doctor is going to be heading to a conference in July, and she was invited. And she was invited because of her research on these brown dwarf stars. And she's going to be speaking at this conference, and she has already submitted her reports and papers and research, and they actually contacted her and invited her to come in July and speak publicly. Now, that right there should be enough to shut these troll babies up and just go away. Now, we know that's not going to happen. But once again, we have people out there trying to intimidate her and trying to email her employer at the university And we know that what do I want to call him? The little four-eyed nerd from Astronomy Live has already tried to have her fired from the university. And now the greaseball of all greaseball trolls, WAP Tech, who I refer to him as WAP scum, because that's exactly what this man is. He hasn't taken a bath in probably, I don't know, what, 20, 30 years? But anyways, he is now emailing the university, and he is attempting to have her fired. Well, the bottom line, ladies and gentlemen, that's never going to happen. And none of these individuals would ever, in this lifetime, ever be able to walk in her shoes based on her education and her time teaching as a professor. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to the doctor. And doctor, I want you to explain to everyone about your invitation to this conference, because if I were you, I'd be pretty proud.
Thank you, Scott. Well, it's not actually that special for physicists. All physicists send abstracts into conferences. This is a general physics conference, but it's got different tracks. There's the astrophysics track, there's the particle physics track, there's the string theory track, and I submitted 2 abstracts to this conference. I submitted one on brown dwarf stars to the astrophysics track. I submitted one on the SDO eclipse, not being consistent with an eclipse, for the space science track. And both abstracts have been reviewed and have been accepted. The one on brown dwarfs has been accepted as an oral presentation, which means I will get to also write a paper, which will go into the proceedings for the conference. And the SDO one has been accepted as a poster presentation, so it will not get the same kind of exposure, but it will still be seen, and I'm happy to produce a poster presentation for that. So I'm happy that my abstracts, I must say that I was surprised that my abstract on brown dwarf stars was accepted, because I clearly say in the abstract, I talk about observational evidence for brown dwarf stars in the solar system. And usually when you say in the solar system, that is not a very good thing to say. So I was surprised that it was accepted, but it has been accepted. So I'm going to be producing that paper and presenting it at the conference.
So this is a combination of like scientists and physicists and
astrophysicists. These are all physicists. Yeah, these are all physicists. We have astronomers, astrophysicists, all kinds of people that are all physicists but have specialized in the different fields. So astrophysics is a big component of this conference.
Well, I'd like to be, the first to congratulate you. I mean, that's absolutely fantastic. Have you ever done anything like that before?
Oh, yes. I've been presenting papers at conferences since I was a master's student. So, yeah, for many years, I've been presenting papers at conferences. Yeah.
So you're going to go to this conference.
To me.
You're going to go to this conference,
yes.
And you're going to blow the lid off of this, right?
Yes, I think so, because what I have to show them is something they don't usually see.
Well, that's good. That's good. It's about time that somebody opens up their eyes. And well, let's just hope that we make it all the way to July. I know that we have some really startling things going on out there in the world right now, and specifically on the East Coast of the United States. Now, we've been discussing this Operation Gothic Shield and what has happened with the power grid, the power outages, and what's happening with the sun. And earlier this morning, me and you, we took a look at what's happening with the sun. And we also reviewed a video that was put out yesterday by the YouTube channel Suspicious Observer. And he had mentioned some material that was put out there by, I think, the University of Delaware pertaining to cosmic rays. and an increase, a 19% increase in cosmic rays impacting the Earth. And during his presentation, I mean, he actually sounded kind of startled. I don't want to use the word scared, but he did use the words, you know, this is a very serious situation that we are facing with our sun.
Yes.
And can you just, as we begin, can you just explain to everyone, like you've explained to me, what cosmic rays are? Because, you know, I mean, cosmic rays, it sounds kind of, you know, sci-fi, but if you could give us a brief explanation of what they are, it'd be great.
Okay, so cosmic rays are actually particles. They can be just protons, or in other words, hydrogen nuclei or helium nuclei. Some of them are more massive nuclei, but most of them are protons and helium or alpha particles. But they are very energetic. That is, they have energies higher than 100 MeV. They move very fast, so they're relativistic, so they move close to the speed of light. And they are supposed to be coming from outside the solar system. So active nuclei in galaxies usually are supposed to be emitting them. But what usually happens is that when they hit the atmosphere, they cause a whole cascade of other particles because they react with particles in the atmosphere, oxygen, nitrogen, so on. And these cascades that are produced are muons and neutrons. And fast neutrons and muons can reach the surface, and they are very damaging to biological systems. They produce cancer. High energy neutrons are more energetic than gamma rays. Now, gamma rays are just waves, basically, or we can call them photons. They're not, so they're zero mass particles, whilst cosmic rays have a rest mass. That is, they have a mass like particles are supposed to have. Photons, we can think of them as particles, but they have zero mass. So they're basically waves. And neutrons are more damaging to biological systems, to organisms, than gamma rays. But we can think of certain gamma rays as cosmic rays as well if they are very high energy gamma rays. People put the two together in cosmic rays, but usually cosmic rays are actually particles, ionized particles. That is, they are missing their electrons. They're just the nucleus of the atom. They're moving very fast. They cause a whole cascade of particles in the atmosphere. And so they produce a whole lot of other particles that then, some of them manage to get all the way down to the surface. And if they increase, they produce a whole lot of ionized particles in the atmosphere. So they can damage the atmosphere in different ways. Also, if we have lots of it, it causes something called nucleation. That is, we get cloud formation forming around the particles that are coming out of these cascades. And so it causes cloud cover, and it can cause increased lightning, because now the atmosphere becomes very ionized, and then it produces lightning. And as the upper atmosphere produces electric discharges and tries to equalize with the surface of the Earth. So all this happens because of cosmic rays, and because they are so damaging, they are well, they are measured, and there's not much we can do to block them. Our atmosphere only blocks some of them. The neutrons and the muons are able to get to the surface, as I said. So
so whenever you mentioned
yes.
they do a tremendous amount of damage to biological systems, in layman's terms, what is a biological system?
Well, basically, it's a human body or an animal body or plants, anything that is alive, that has cell respiration, that has cell division and things like that. So a living organism, basically.
Okay.
Because when any cell gets impacted by these objects, it's damaged in some way. Sometimes the DNA is damaged, so that can cause mutations, which can lead to cancer. Sometimes the cell is just destroyed, and if enough cells are destroyed in an organ, it can lead to organ failure. Gamma rays can do the same thing. So, that's why radiation is damaging to living tissue. That's what it does. So, so that's what happens. Now he said, suspicious observers in his video, he said that cosmic rays has been measured to have increased by 19%, which is a huge increase. I agree with him, and it will cause huge problems on Earth. The thing is, these cosmic rays are mainly supposed to come from outside the solar system. And what happens is when the sun gets weaker during a solar minimum, then the heliosphere is not as able to keep these cosmic rays out, these ionized particles outside of the solar system. So more of them are supposed to come in during those times. So that's part of what happens. But I believe that something else is happening, and that is because of these coronal holes, we are getting high energy ionized particles coming from the sun. So the sun is becoming a source of cosmic rays as well. And that's adding to what's coming from outside the solar system. So one of the reasons.
This is almost like a 1-2 punch. We're being hit from two different types of cosmic rays, one from out of the solar system, and now what is being produced by the sun.
That's right. So they come right through these coronal holes because the corona is supposed to stop these high energy particles from leaving the surface of the sun. And when the corona opens up and is less dense, then these particles can come out from the surface of the sun. And that's how the sun becomes a source of cosmic radiation. And of course, 19% increase is quite an increase. I don't think that increase is just from outside the solar system. Not at all. It's definitely because of what's happening with the sun.
Now, how would we protect ourselves? How would we protect ourselves from something like that here on Earth?
Well, the more layers you put between yourself and the upper atmosphere, the better. So I suppose staying indoors would be better than anything else. But it's a difficult thing because these particles are so energetic that they can go right through your windows and so on. Boy,
that just sounds like a whole hell of a lot of bad news. Yes. Getting into what is actually occurring on the sun now. Earlier this morning we were reviewing some of the SDO footage, which is actually up on the screen now for everyone to see what we're being faced with at this time. And just taking a look at the sun as we are seeing it right now, what type of observations would you be making with what you're seeing?
Well, the first thing I notice is the coronal holes. Well, we can see the corona has shrunk a lot from what it was a few years ago. And even though we are 3 years away from the current solar maximum, which, it was in 2014. So we're 3 years away. But the last solar maximum was not very energetic, let's say. But if we compare the sun with what it was in 2011, I'm still working on an article on that. The sun is much weaker than it was in 2011, which was also 3 years away from the solar maximum.
Now, what about...
So we can see how dark, yeah?
I'm sorry. Go ahead. If you could go ahead and finish.
Okay, now I just see how dark it is, how small the corona is, but also we have some strong activity at the same time. So the southern part, or the right side that we see mostly here, we see the coronal hole, we see darkness around it, and then we get these sunspots, which show that the sun is actually has become quite active recently. And this is a surprise as well, because the sun has been so quiet for so long. And as we are heading further towards the solar minimum, it is a surprise to see this kind of activity on the sun.
Yeah, that was actually my next question for you. It was the uprising all of a sudden of these very, very large sunspots, because I know through the latter part of the summer and the fall of 2016 and going all through the entire winter, we were just about completely sunspotless. Yes. on our sun. And people that do analyze the sun, and I keep track of everything myself. I mean, it was basically, you know, sunspots were almost non-existent, and then several weeks ago they started to appear. And I mean, these sunspots now that have appeared, I mean, they look very ominous. They look actually very dangerous.
Yes. Well, you know, in 2014, we saw these kinds of sunspots, and that's why they then called it the solar maximum. So obviously, at the moment, we're not supposed to see these. But don't forget, whatever happens to the sun, it happens for a reason. There's something that's causing it. I don't believe that the sun is just doing things for no reason at all. If it's got sunspots, there is a reason behind it. And from what I know that is going on with the sun, and we'll go on into that when I get to the report, it's probably reacting to an object out there, perhaps approaching it. That's what I think. And I've seen in 2007 already, when I first observed that first brown dwarf star, how the sun reacted to this object approaching it. And it goes dark on one side, and then it has a huge explosion in the direction of the object. So I'm not, if the sun's reacting this way, I think it is likely that there's something approaching it.
And definitely, if something like a brown dwarf star was approaching the sun, I mean, this would basically, the sun would definitely react to it in a violent manner.
Yes, definitely. I've seen it do that many times. You see that filament there? It's quite amazing.
Yes. Now it's
actually become very active recently. It's extremely active, whilst at the same time it has huge coronal holes. That is weak and strong at the same time. That's what I observe. It's very strange.
Yeah, I was watching this this video feed of the last 48 hours, and that filament that whips out of there, I mean, it is just absolutely huge, and we're going to continue to see this type of activity. Yeah, I guess you know, we can consider the report that was put out by suspicious observers today. I guess that came from the University of Delaware and some of their research, but I mean, I would have to consider that a warning.
I wanted to make a mention real quick. At the beginning of this, I'd let you guys know that my employer had canceled our trip to Auckland, New Zealand, because the amount of earthquakes being reported by USGS. The physicist has recently put out an article regarding sun activity and its direct correlation with earthquake activity. Well, just from layman's point of view, I think there is a relation there, or we wouldn't be staying home. And if this had been my personal trip, it would have been, you know, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 that I would have lost. The other mention I wanted to make is that I put up your presentation that we're reviewing today on my site. So if folks want to look at it in detail, the coronal hole, look, I don't know anything about the sun, but that friggin' hole is enormous. And the activity over the last 96 hours, I mean, like I said, I didn't know anything about the sun. I'm still learning, but it appears to be, like Thor News says, freaking out. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Chris, for that. Yeah, you're right. The sun is freaking out, and the Earth is freaking out, as you say. So there must be a direct correlation, and I do explain in that presentation is actually the coronal holes and how they are moving around the sun, and my own idea about what coronal holes are. So yeah, it's, I think what I came up with, even I was surprised, but that's what the logic led me to. So when we get to that, I'm sure, yeah, here it is. Okay, so yeah, that's the article I've just written.
You like to use the 21.1 nanometer because it seems to really bring out the full texture of the coronal hole as well as other activity in the corona and flares, etc. And just, you know, for the viewer or listener, I have found, even personally looking at the SDO sites, etc., that the purple dude, the 21.1 seems to be the best to look at craziness. Go ahead, bud.
That's right. Yeah. Yes, I like, as you say, the 21.1 because it gives us a more in-depth view of the corona. The corona is always larger in the 21.1 nanometer wavelength. Yeah. So so I entitled this presentation "Magnetically Interacting Brown Dwarf Stars and Coronal Holes of Varying Size," because I started looking at the coronal holes and I thought, oh my goodness, but look at that. As the sun rotates, these coronal holes are changing in size. So as you see the sun rotating from left to right, you start to see the coronal holes on the left first. And they're very small when they're on the left. And it's not just the perspective, because I clearly show it's not just the perspective. The coronal holes actually grow in size, and sometimes they even connect. Sometimes you have two coronal holes that are not connected to each other. And as the sun rotates towards the right, the coronal hole rotates with the sun and it grows in size. And the coronal holes seem to be, at least at the moment, be the largest when they are facing the camera, which is the satellite that's orbiting the Earth, and therefore when it's facing the Earth. So that's where I started from. And also I know what coronal holes are. Coronal holes are places where the sun's magnetic field has connected to another object's magnetic field. So this is what I use here. So here's the coronal hole from April 22nd. And then if we scroll down a little bit more, you can see how it grows in size. I show it in the next figure. So yeah, there we are. Okay, so these are the images from April 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th. You see the orange arrow. Okay, I used orange, but it looks yellow. Point to the coronal hole and what it looked like on the 16th. Okay, so that's the yellow or the orange arrow. You can see as you move from the first image to the second image to the third image, it looks larger. The fourth, the fifth, and finally the sixth is from the 21st. So the day before the one that was in the first image. You can see how it grows larger. And also you can see on the 16th, there is another coronal hole that is facing Earth at that moment. And as the sun rotates to the right, as you can see in the second image, the third image, that particular coronal hole seems to decrease in size in the next 4 images. So it looks like the coronal holes grow in size as the sun rotates until they face the Earth. And then when they face away from the Earth, it looks like they are decreasing in size. Yeah. And I think that's significant.
Yeah, I've noticed that.
Yes.
Yeah, so, sorry to interrupt both of you. Is it because of is there a magnetic flux transfer or connection between the Earth and the sun? Is that why? Or
it's not, I don't think it's the Earth. I've reached the conclusion that these magnetic field lines connect the easiest to an object that has comparable magnetic field strength. So the sun's magnetic field does not connect to the planet's magnetic fields in the same way. And I mean, there is an exchange through the solar wind, but it doesn't open up coronal holes so that it connects magnetically to planets. It connects magnetically to stars that have comparable magnetic fields or stronger. And brown dwarf stars have very strong magnetic fields. The magnetic fields are stronger than the sun's magnetic field.
Okay.
That's a characteristic of brown dwarf stars and white dwarf stars. And of course, brown dwarf stars are cooled down white dwarf stars.
So let me play the devil's advocate for just a minute. Why do we normally have coronal holes? Well, I'll just pretend that I'm a puke troll, and I don't believe that coronal holes are caused by a brown dwarf star. Hit me up with some information, girl. Tell me why, you know.
Okay, that comes back to the fact that magnetic field lines cannot be open. It is impossible. Every physicist knows that magnetic field lines form loops. So when the sun's magnetic field opens up into space, it has to close somewhere. Where is it going to close? Outside the galaxy? I don't know. But it has to close somewhere. And the fact that it opens means that the field lines are being pulled into something, as far as I'm concerned, so that they can close somewhere else. And so there has to be an object with a strong magnetic field in that direction where the magnetic field lines flow out towards, so that the magnetic field lines can close there. So that is my belief about the coronal holes. Everyone knows that coronal holes have open magnetic field lines, and no one tells you that the magnetic field lines have to close somewhere, because there's no such thing as an open magnetic field line. Only electric fields have poles. I mean, they have sinks, and I mean, the field lines can flow right out from a point. But magnetic field lines always form continuous loops. There's no such thing as open field lines. And that is how I started thinking about this. But that's not the first thing I came up with brown dwarf stars. I first came up with the idea of brown dwarf stars because I saw the sun was going dark. And there is no way that it's normal for a star to go dark. There has to be something causing it. And my own ideas about everything that happens with the sun and in the solar system is there has to be a reason for it. There has to be an explanation. Things do not just happen with no reason. We are not getting more and more coronal holes. We are not getting larger and larger coronal holes on the sun for no reason. The sun is not getting, or has been getting, weaker for years for no reason. There has to be something draining it. The only thing that can drain it is another object that has the ability to drain the sun's energy and absorb it. And the only thing that can do that is a star. But then you have to accept the fact that stars are electrical in nature up to a point. And why I think stars are electrical is because thermonuclear reactions from the core of the sun were powering the sun. And I do believe there are thermonuclear reactions, but I don't think they're coming from the core of the sun, because if you look at sunspots, the sunspots are cooler inside and deep inside them, and they look darker than the outside, the surface of the sun. And if thermonuclear reactions were powering the sun from the core, that would be impossible. It doesn't make sense to me. So also, the sun would never go dark, never, if it was powered from its core by thermonuclear reactions, because the light would be coming right out of the interior of the sun from the core. There is no way it could ever go dark. But the evidence shows that the sun is going dark. Therefore, it cannot be powered by thermonuclear reactions from its core. It probably is powered by thermonuclear reactions in some way, in its atmosphere perhaps, on its surface maybe, although it's cool there, so it's probably above the surface where the thermonuclear fusion reactions are happening. All right, am I getting off target here?
No, but this is just riveting information. I mean, every time we speak, every time we speak and we go through this information, I mean, it is definitely a learning process for me, and I know all of our viewers. Some of it may be above and over our heads, but we are getting a better understanding of how the sun works. And what is most important is what is affecting the sun. So, ladies and gentlemen, the bottom line is whatever affects our sun will definitely affect us here on planet Earth. There's just no other way around that. So this is all very, very important information, because without our sun, humanity does not survive. It does not go on. It is the end. We would freeze to death. The Earth would be an ice ball like Pluto, you know, and we would not exist.
Yes.
So I don't think we're that lucky.
Yeah. So whenever we're dealing with these issues that have arisen with the sun over the period of these years, nobody on the face of this planet has given anybody else the reasons why this is happening. And you know, we've all been tracking the whole entire theory of Nibiru, Planet X, the brown dwarf stars, Nemesis, and finally we have someone with a massive education and someone who is willing to step up and help us understand what is happening, because the bottom line is all of this information is being hidden from us. We are truly, as a human race, being deceived horribly. Absolutely.
You know, there's a few channels right now that have BP Earthwatch, excuse me, has a video out even 33 minutes ago about the sun wigging out. So other channels are actively looking at this very intently, and the physicists' thoughts on these matters are far more in line with anything reasonable that I've ever heard than from any other channel. Even though you may not be an astrophysicist, I don't think that matters. You have a clearly genius level mind, and going at this material the way you do makes it easier and digestible for all of us, and I personally appreciate that. And good job on those papers being accepted.
Oh, thanks, Chris.
I thought that was friggin' awesome, and that's an in your face. Okay, bye.
Yeah, I think Chris is absolutely right. And as me and the doctor were speaking this morning, that was one of the first things that she had mentioned to me. And, you know, I was very, very happy for her. that she'll have the opportunity to stand in front of her peers, astrophysicists and physicists and scientists and astronomers. And, you know, astronomers and physicists and their whole community, you know, over the period of the last, 10 to 15 years, there has been this big push to find out more and more and more about these brown dwarf stars. I watched a 45-minute video, and it was produced by an astrophysicist and an astronomer. And together, these two have been investigating brown dwarf stars. And they even mentioned, they went all the way back to, you know, the Big Bang Theory and how brown dwarf stars played a pivotal role in our solar system. We just didn't know they were there because they're so dark. Mm-hmm. And they, you know, they might have been so far out there, but we didn't have the technology to see them. But now we do have the technology to find them. And there is more and more evidence coming out that, I mean, just not too long ago, there was a massive release of information pertaining to a massive brown dwarf star lurking right outside of Pluto. I mean, they went on RT News and a couple of other media outlets covered it. Yeah. And I watched the information. So, ladies and gentlemen, these scientists and these astronomers, they know about these objects. Whether or not they are suppressing the information about what is occurring in our inner solar system, that is probably the case. Yes. But the bottom line is, whether we are dealing with a planet X or Nibiru or whatever's out there, the bottom line is, and our doctor of physics and Mr. Chris Potter and a whole host of other people, we really feel 100% that what we're dealing with here can have very tragic, catastrophic circumstances on humanity and this planet. So when I refer to it is time to wake up, that is exactly what I mean. It is time to wake up, open up your eyes, and start listening to this information and start passing it along to whomever. I know it's a very hard subject to open up a conversation with, but we as a people, we owe it to each other to get this information out, sit somebody down and say, listen, if you give a damn, then you need to understand what's going on. Because too often in today's society, do people just walk around with their cell phone in their hand? They have to take their phone to the bathroom with them everywhere they go. But no one is realizing or understanding what is happening. And without the sun, we're done. And the sun can be our worst enemy also. So it's like the double-edged sword. If you slide down it, you're going to get cut on both sides. But we need the sun for humanity to continue. So, Doctor, I'll let you go ahead and continue with the second part of your report.
Yes, maybe I should. I think Chris's question about the coronal holes and the brown dwarf star is quite important. So let me just mention something about that. First of all, I found out there were brown dwarf stars in the solar system by, as I mentioned, seeing that the sun was going dark, and by examining the Secchi images and seeing that there were objects in the inner solar system that were having plasma discharges. So I knew these had to be stars, and they seemed a lot smaller than other objects. And then I also caught images of the stars that had ionized clouds, looked like they had clouds of ionized gas around them. And I think there were pictures taken of objects that to me were behaving as if they were brown dwarf stars. And I started to understand these brown dwarf stars were coming into the solar system, and they were dark initially, and they were absorbing energy from the sun, which is why the sun was going dark when they went close to it. And then so I started making connections with the fact that there had to be brown dwarf stars in the solar system. And then eventually I made the connection between brown dwarf stars and coronal holes. And this has been quite more recent. I think more recently I wrote a paper about the coronal holes and how the magnetic field lines have to close. And by then I already knew there were brown dwarf stars in the solar system. So then I made the connection between the brown dwarf star and the coronal hole. And here I take those ideas further, because if there is a coronal hole there, there's a brown dwarf star connected to it. And that's a logical progression for me. And where it takes me is very surprising. But here in these two images, I'm just showing how the coronal hole is growing. So on the left image, you see the coronal hole looks quite small, but in the middle, the blue arrow points to it. There's this bright spot in the middle of it. And you can clearly see that in the right image, that spot is there, but it's a lot smaller. Okay. Now, the perspective we are looking at, which is more on the side in the left image, and the coronal hole is now facing us a bit better in the right image. That has nothing to do with the fact that that spot has decreased in size. That is obvious. This spot has decreased in size. And the coronal hole, the area where you see black, has definitely increased. Also, the red arrow points to an area below the sun in the left image that is just dark purple. And in the right image, it's black. Okay, so you can clearly see that it's grown. And even above the blue arrow, there's another region where you can clearly see that has gone black. So the coronal hole seems to be growing. And it's even clearer in the next two images. So if you scroll down a bit more. Yeah, so those two. So there you see, again, the coronal hole, the area behind the spot. You can see that little bright spot in the middle of the coronal hole in both images. Again, the spot decreases in size, but I don't even mention that. The blue arrow is pointing to an area which is right behind that bright spot. In the left image, you can see it's still normal sun. It's still not part of the coronal hole. But in the right image, there's a big part of the sun that's now part of the coronal hole. That's where the blue arrow is pointing. So you can clearly see that the coronal hole is growing in size. The red arrow as well points to an area where there was still purple. It was a purple area in the left image. In the right image is now a coronal hole. Also, we can see an area below that seems to open up into coronal holes. The green arrow points to that. The yellow arrow points to an area above that has definitely become a coronal hole area as well. So you can see from that the coronal hole grows in size as the sun rotates to the right. We scroll down some more.
You know, just not to interrupt, but there are an awful lot of people in the live chat with us right now that want to absolutely thank you for everything that you're doing. Thank you for your intelligence. Okay. And there are quite a few of them that want me to tell you that they love you.
Oh, thank you. That's very nice. That's lovely. Thank you, Scott. And thank you to the people. That's nice. Okay, so there you see again the blue arrow points to an area that's dark purple in the left image, and in the right image you see that that purple area is no longer purple, it's just dark. So it looked like there were two coronal holes separated by a bridge of normal sun there, which is gone in the right image. So you definitely can see that the coronal hole is growing. And the bottom coronal hole also grows in size. You can see it's larger on the right-hand side. And we can point to other features, like right in the middle at the top, how certain areas that were still emitting light are no longer emitting light in this wavelength, in the 21.1. So the coronal hole definitely seems to be growing. That's what I try to show in these images. All right, so if we scroll down some more. Okay, so these are showing that, so this is from April 10th. This is the previous coronal hole. And I show that it also grows as the sun rotates. It starts very small on the left, and as the sun rotates, you can see it getting larger and larger and larger until you get to the 15th, where it looks the largest when it's facing the Earth. So the fact that that is happening to me is very significant. And that's part of what I use to come up with an explanation for what's going on. All right, so we can scroll down some more.
I got you. Hold on one second.
All right, so there I explain. Okay, maybe we shouldn't go down all the way down, because I explain that this coronal hole rotates with the sun, and the sun has a rotational period of 24.5 days. And as I've explained before, there's an object connected to that coronal hole. The coronal hole is connected to a brown dwarf star, a star with a large magnetic field that causes the sun to open up its own magnetic field, and then there's a particle flux transfer between the two objects, because particles from the sun then spiral around the magnetic field lines that connect the sun to that star. As you can see there in the image, that's what I show there. There's the coronal hole, there's the sun in the middle, there's the brown dwarf star. And star is what is causing that coronal hole to open up. So now, but there I actually calculated where the brown dwarf star is, because I observed that the coronal holes rotate with the sun. So it looks like these brown dwarf stars have come in, gone into orbit around the sun so that they match the sun's rotational. But that means that if we use Kepler's third law, we can immediately find where they are in relation to the center of the sun. Because Kepler's third law, if we have a period, immediately gives us an orbital radius. So that's what I did. I calculated the orbital radius, and it turns out these brown dwarf stars, or that particular one connected to that coronal hole there, are at 0.2 AU. And that is exactly between the center of the sun and Mercury's orbit. So they seem to be orbiting there. Right in the inner solar system, very close to the sun. That's what the logic led me to, because if we have a brown dwarf star connected to the coronal hole and it keeps pace with the sun as it rotates, that's where it has to be, at 0.2 AU.
And once again, this is
okay. So
this is probably the good reason why they turned off the stereo behind. What is that? It's not the core 2.
Yeah, stereo B. Yeah. They turned off stereo B because it was catching. I remember that it was on stereo B that I caught that brown dwarf star that went past the sun in 2007, which for me was absolutely amazing. So it was showing way too many things, and they just couldn't have that, so they turned it off.
So this is definitely giving me a better explanation for all of these coronal holes, because, you know, I started tracking these coronal holes in the middle of 2016, around June and July. And then I started to see that things were kind of getting out of hand, and the amount of coronal holes and the size of the coronal holes was just something that I could no longer ignore.
Mm-hmm.
So I started to investigate them thoroughly. I started keeping track of them, every single instance that they came Earth facing. And just like you have explained, this solves it for me, because just like you explained, you would start to see a very small opening when the sun was rotating from the left. And then you would get a very small view of a small coronal hole. But then as the sun rotated towards the right and then became Earth facing, I mean, you can literally see the coronal hole start to open and expand very rapidly. I mean, within 24 hours, if you were viewing the 48-hour loop on the STO. And then, as you've said, as the coronal hole passed by the Earth and moved off to the right side, it started to close and disappear. So, you know, it cannot be a coincidence over the period of all of this time that coronal holes are only opening up Earth facing.
Yeah.
It's impossible, don't you think? I mean,
it is.
I mean, the laws of probability have to kick in, and okay, well, every once in a while, yes, but constantly, every single time, we're faced with this. You know what? I had one question, and there were several people in the live chat that were asking the question, and you may or may not be able to answer this because it's kind of directed towards someone who is an astrophysicist. And do you know what astrophysicists theorize about coronal holes? What are their theories? Do you know? Well,
I know that they actually is not very much about coronal holes. All there is, all they explain is there are areas of open magnetic field lines. They don't usually go much further than that. And they explain then what happens in the sun when the magnetic field lines are open, which is there is particles leave the sun. They do spiral around the field lines and they leave the sun, and therefore that area has less particles, is less dense, it becomes darker, and the temperature decreases. That is the official astrophysical explanation for what a coronal hole is. As far as I know, no one has yet explained the real reason behind a coronal hole. Why do the magnetic field lines open at all? And I haven't yet come across any explanation as to why that happens.
Well, you might want to take over that conference in July and take these astrophysicists and astronomers to school, as they say, and give them a complete scientific definition of why this is occurring. There was another question that someone had asked, a Miss Claudia Jones, and she was asking if you could explain how long does it take for a coronal hole to heal in general?
A coronal hole to heal. The thing is,
well, maybe to close.
To close. Okay. I have not actually seen a coronal hole close completely. In my previous article, I saw a coronal hole decrease in size within a few hours. I think it was within 1 hour and a few minutes. And then I explained what was happening there was that another brown dwarf star was getting between, we have here, there's a brown dwarf star connected to the sun. If another brown dwarf star goes in between the two, because the other brown dwarf star has a magnetic field that's stronger than the sun's, it connects, the magnetic field lines then connect the two brown dwarf stars. And I show that in an image lower down, so you will see it. because the magnetic field lines connect to magnetic fields of comparable strength. And because brown dwarf stars have magnetic fields that are stronger than the sun, they actually prefer to connect to each other. So if a brown dwarf star gets between the sun and that brown dwarf star, the sun would get shielded somewhat. But the opposite happens if the brown dwarf star comes along and is further out than that brown dwarf star we see there. Then what we get is a compounding of the magnetic field, and more particles will leave the sun. So I'll show all that in this paper. But what I have seen is if a coronal hole is to heal, is because there is a disconnection of the magnetic field between the sun and that object. So either the object just suddenly moves very far away from the sun and then it will heal, or another brown dwarf star gets between the sun and that brown dwarf star and it shields the sun, and that would cause the coronal hole to close up.
Now we had another question, and very interesting question, and I think it's definitely important. The brown dwarf stars, the introduction of these brown dwarf stars in our solar system, this is something that is relatively new, because I mean, I guess as far back as, you know, early man, I mean, we don't have any type of documentation of this type of object or objects in our solar system. It is only now that this information is actually coming out.
Well, there is some old writings that mention objects that may have come into the solar system a very long time ago that could have been brown dwarf stars, because they were emitting light. They were not like planets with phases, and so it may have happened before. There are some people who believe that either Jupiter or Saturn were at one time brown dwarf stars that came into the solar system and eventually became gas giant planets in the solar system. So, I mean, I cannot know for sure. I mean, these are ancient writings, and there's all kinds of problems with interpreting what's being written and so on. But these ideas are out there. So maybe it's not, it just hasn't happened in recorded history as far as we know. I mean, our recent recorded history. The only time we started hearing about this was in the 1980s, when they said that these objects were coming in towards the solar system and were only visible in infrared light. And then there was silence about that, but the information is still there. I think these brown dwarf stars have probably been coming into our solar system for 50 years or so.
Wow.
Because our solar system is huge, and when they're very far out there, they move in slowly and they accelerate as they move in towards the sun. So I don't know, maybe 50, even 100 years ago, they could have started moving into the solar. Don't forget, the solar system is the size of the solar system is 100 AU, so 100 times the distance between the sun and the earth. It's huge. So there may even be more coming in as we speak.
Yeah,
we don't know how many there are.
Yeah, because I know the last seminar conference that I watched, oh my, it was 3 hours long. It was held at Harvard University with all of these astronomers and astrophysicists and physicists. And they were actually reviewing some astronomy information, and they actually had these photographs, you know, deep space photographs of clusters of brown dwarf stars that were, I mean, this was scary looking, because there were clusters of them, 5, 6, 7 all together,
Yeah.
And I mean, they were all moving, and that's actually how they found them.
Mm-hmm.
Because I guess when they were looking at the, as they call the plates, the photographs that are taken, and they take all of these photographs and then they look for movement. And then they said, oh, okay, well, there's a brown dwarf star. There's another one. There's another one. There's another one. They were in a cluster, and they were all moving away from each other. But when they first spotted them, they were kind of in a very large cluster. And then as a 6-month period went on, and they kept the observations up, they had all moved apart. And it was a very, very, very interesting seminar at Harvard. I was, I mean, a lot of the information they were discussing was far beyond, my knowledge, but they did make it very easy to understand and very, very clear with their information. And I was pretty blown away by that. And again, this is the hottest topic right now in astrophysics and astronomy. They may not always be out there talking about it, but this is what they're really searching for. It's just as we said the other day, who cares about a little tiny exoplanet that is past Pluto, and they're not even sure if it's spherical? It may just be a frozen rock. Who cares about that?
Yes.
We have to care about what is in our solar system right now. What is causing these issues? Did you want me to go ahead and scroll down into the next phase of your report?
Yes, you can do that. Okay, so then I come up with the first explanation. What could be happening here? I don't use this. I explain how this is a possibility, but it turns out it's not a very good possibility. But it does explain what can happen between these brown dwarf stars and the sun. So what you see there is the brown dwarf star on the outside at 0.2 AU in 3 different positions. And you see the large coronal hole, and you see the Earth right in the middle. It's the blue circle there, and you see Earth's orbit. And the brown dwarf star in the middle is in alignment with the Earth and the sun. And the large coronal hole is the one in the middle as well. So this is actually what we observe, is the large coronal holes. The larger coronal holes are always facing the Earth. So now what could be happening is that when the brown dwarf star, the red one, brown dwarf star 1, is on the left side, and then another brown dwarf star comes between it and the sun, and this I already explained from my previous article. That's I think what happened, because the coronal hole changed in size from 1 hour to the next. It seemed to be closing up. And if that brown dwarf star comes between the sun and the red brown dwarf star, then it connects its magnetic field, because it's stronger than the sun's magnetic field, and it prefers, the magnetic field lines then prefer to connect between each other. So that means the sun is now partially shielded from the red brown dwarf star's magnetic field. So the coronal hole closes up, and its magnetic field lines close. In other words, they go back into the body of the sun, where they are supposed to be if there was no brown dwarf star there. So that would cause the coronal holes on either side, if there were brown dwarf stars in those positions, to be smaller than the coronal hole in the middle.
Wow.
But then I explained this is actually,
this diagram.
This is actually not.
Yeah, this diagram here that you have here, now this is starting to make a lot of sense to me now that I see your illustration and what I've been observing myself and what I've been wondering about for so long. Because I didn't have a chance to review this report before we went on the air. And now, just looking at this This is starting to make 100% sense. This would be the reason why they're blocking out the sun with these damn chemtrails, because if we get into this alignment where the Earth has the brown dwarf between us and the sun, they're not going to want us to see this.
Of course not.
Oh my Lord, have mercy.
But it's actually a lot worse than what you see in this image, as you'll see. Because what I say is this is actually not likely. Don't forget that we have coronal holes coming in about every 7 days and going through this process. It's not likely to always have the two brown dwarf stars, the red one and the little one, always in alignment like that to produce this. So then I go to another explanation. But this explains it does happen sometimes that the sun is shielded by another brown dwarf star when it comes in between the two. But I don't think this is explaining what we see happening every 7 days with these coronal holes. There has to be something else. It's not likely to always have these brown dwarf stars in exactly this alignment. Oh, it is possible, but there is another more probable. So that's what I go down into next.
Okay, I'll go ahead and go down.
Yeah, if we... Okay, so this is the next picture. Now what we see here, we don't have the small brown dwarf star going in between. What we have is another brown dwarf star just behind the Earth. That's brown dwarf star 2. It's the brown one, just behind the little blue circle, which is the Earth. That's right. So now what is happening here is the large coronal hole is, well, it starts out small, and it's small on the left and on the right. But why it's larger when it's facing the Earth is because there's always a brown dwarf star behind the Earth. And the magnetic field then of the two connecting, the red one and the brown one, compounds the effect on the sun, so that more particles leave the sun, go into the red-brown dwarf star, and then the brown dwarf star's particles plus the sun's particles that have reached it go down to the one behind that. So the fact that when they are in alignment, it compounds the effect, which makes the coronal hole larger. So that's the second explanation. Now, this is more likely to happen because every time this brown dwarf star goes by the Earth, and this brown is in alignment with the brown dwarf star that is right behind the Earth. It's keeping pace with the Earth. And don't forget that I've written an article before in the Secchi images. There was always that black area right next to the Earth, and I said there's an object there, and it must be a brown dwarf star, very close. I mean, it's possible it's not behind the Earth. It could be just in front of the Earth, but it's very close to the Earth. So there's always an object that's somehow very close to the Earth, and I think it's a brown dwarf star. And then it would cause this effect. Every time the coronal hole turns following the red-brown dwarf star, as it comes into that position, which is in line with the Earth, it's in alignment with the other brown dwarf star behind the Earth. And then that compounds the effect, the coronal hole opens up.
Absolutely
so
amazing.
That's what I draw. Yeah. So then if we scroll down a little bit more, I actually show the picture, I think, of that, one of the Secchi images. Yeah, there is that black areas you see behind the Earth there. And it's not all there. They just leave a little bit of it there for some reason because it was probably seen. It's been there, I don't know, 2016 it was there. It's been there for a long time, that dark area just behind the Earth. So this object obviously has an orbit that's very close to the Earth's orbit. In order to stay close to... Yeah.
Do you think that would be the possibility why we saw so much of Venus illuminated throughout the wintertime months here in the northern hemisphere? Because Venus just looked like a big halogen headlight in the sky, even when we were only supposed to be seeing 58% of it.
Yes.
It would look like a big light bulb.
What's happening to Venus is the fact that there are extra stars in the solar system, and Venus does not have a magnetosphere like Earth does. It doesn't produce its own magnetic field. So whenever there is more radiation in the solar system, its ionosphere is going to start glowing like a light bulb, because Venus is actually more like a comet than a planet. Comets do not produce their own magnetic fields. They produce a coma and a tail as a result of ion exchange with the solar wind. So when the solar wind gets stronger, will produce a stronger solar wind, and the coronal holes, it will cause a faster solar. They go past Venus. Yeah.
All right, Doc, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, you were cutting out.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize.
Yeah, just for about 15, 20 seconds.
Okay. Yes, I'm here.
You're back.
Yes, I'm back. Okay.
Now I had exited out of the report. Well,
yeah, I was just explaining about Venus, that it actually behaves like a comet because it doesn't have its own magnetosphere. It's got an induced magnetosphere.
Yeah, because that was a lot. So many people had questions throughout the entire winter time about why Venus was so bright, and there were a few channels out there on YouTube that were trying to explain it, but none of it made any sense to me, because it was very easy to look up the different phases of Venus, what we would be seeing of Venus from Earth, and it just didn't compute. So
no.
if we were seeing a crescent moon from Earth, then we should be seeing a crescent moon, not a full moon.
Right.
So the same would apply with any other planet. If you were only supposed to be seeing 58% of it, then it would look like a crescent moon, not a full moon, or a full view of this planet. And we saw this the entire winter, November, December, January, February, and into the beginning of March. It just looked like a big headlight in the sky.
Yeah, because what Venus did was, it's basically a comet. Because of the increased radiation and solar wind in the solar system, because of the additional brown dwarf stars and the additional ionized gas in the solar system that these brown dwarf stars have brought in, Venus became what it actually is, which is a comet, and it created a coma. So it lighted up like a comet does in the solar system. That's why it became so bright. You can clearly see that it's got a tail just like a comet. It doesn't have a normal magnetosphere tail like the other planets that have their own magnetic field.
Yeah. Now let me. Okay. Now you've obviously heard of the Operation Gotham Shield that's being conducted in the United States, on the East Coast of the United States, and I believe this is supposed to start. I think it was supposed to start today, and stretch out. And now there is this this threat of a solar event. What I mean, have you read up on this Gotham Shield operation?
Well, yes, well, I've heard about it, that they have this operation. Usually, it's preparation for something. I know what's happening in the solar system right now, and remember, there was that brown dwarf star that I calculated twice its position. That's the one that was coming from outside Earth's orbit. So I calculated where it was in October, and it was between Jupiter and Saturn. And then I calculated at the beginning of April, I think, where it was. And it was just behind Mars' orbit. It was at 1.9 AU. And the orbital radius for Mars is 1.5 AU. So it was only 0.4 AU behind Mars' orbit. So then I calculated, because it moved 5 AU in 151 days, because it was at 6.9 AU in October of 2016. And it was at 1.9 in April of that was, I think, the 13th or the 14th of April. Sorry, the 13th or the 14th of March. Am I getting it wrong? No, yes, that's right. 13th or 14th of March, that's when we had that magnetopause reversal. And then I thought, okay, so if it moved 5 AU in 151 days, how long will it be if it continues to move at that speed before it crosses Earth's orbit? That, I think I came up with about the 10th of April. It would cross Earth's orbit. So it would have taken 27 days to move 0.9 AU. Then I thought, okay, so then it's moving towards the sun. If it's going right up to the sun like the other brown dwarf stars have done, say to 0.2 or 0.1 AU, then it should take another 27 days. And when do those 27 days end? From the 10th of April, they end on the 7th of May. So that would mean that this particular brown dwarf star would be reaching the sun about then. Obviously, I think it would speed up even more, because the closer it gets to the sun, the faster it will move. So it may get to the sun between now and the 7th of May. That's what I'm thinking.
And
Perhaps
they were carrying out some of this Operation Gotham Shield like all the way through to May 6th, and going into some of Terrell Blackstar's investigations. You know, he was stating that, you know, whenever we get into the month of May, specifically around May 4th, we were going to start to see a tremendous amount of activity. And that was going to be like the beginning of like the pinnacle. You know, we were going to be right in it. We're going to see the increase in earthquake activity and volcanic activity, of a lot of disturbances on this planet. But it seems to me that the United States government, they seem to know something countries don't know. And having this Operation Gotham Shield, this is just, you know, the coincidences are they're just too shady, as we would say here in the United States. There's a lot of shady stuff going on right now, and for them to do all of this and have all of the federal agencies, all of the local and the state, and have everybody involved in this, and New York City, and the possibilities now of having a major solar event. Now, in your opinion, the collapse of these power grids that happened the other day, still, there is no official explanation for any of it. And then we were coming to find out 24 hours later, 48 hours later, that the United States was not the only country that had the power grid issue.
Yes.
It was, there were power grid issues worldwide, but they were not reported, and the information slowly came out. So the sun and its activity can definitely have an effect on power grids, satellites, cell phone usage, internet access. Am I correct? I mean, this does happen.
Absolutely. Don't forget that even cosmic radiation can affect power grids, because these are ionized particles. It's the solar wind, the fast solar wind. They can give rise to geomagnetic storms because these are ionized particles that are hitting our atmosphere. The ionized particles are ionizing our atmosphere, and they are moving around. And of course, it's causing induced currents in the power grids through induction.
Now, what do you think do you think our government is actually preparing for a solar event, and they're utilizing this Gotham Shield event preparation, whatever the hell they want to call it? I don't agree with what they're doing, but there is the huge possibility that they want all of these agencies in place for a reason. Because why, if they knew something was going to happen, they wouldn't want to start moving everybody in and create a panic. They would simply tell everybody, okay, this is an operation, this is a drill, and this is what we're going to do. We're going to test out this, we're going to test out that. And then just before it actually happens, the power grids go down.
Yeah.
Because we did have a geomagnetic storm. We were impacted the week before from that massive coronal hole that was facing the Earth. And the cosmic rays and all of the energy did impact the Earth.
That's right.
So in your opinion, though, I mean, you know, forget about being a physicist and your education in your field, but your personal feeling, your feeling in your heart, do you think that we are being set up for some type of an event? The possibilities are very high, very low. What do you think?
I think that things are really starting to happen now. I really feel that's what's going on. I think the government, especially the U.S. government, doesn't want people to know what's going on, but they know what's going on, and they are preparing for something. You know, the earthquakes have been increasing. We could say that all these events are related to the sun in a way. Everything is about the sun in the end. These brown dwarf stars are here because of the sun. They are here for the sun's energy. The sun is reacting to these brown dwarf stars. What the sun is doing, what these brown dwarf stars are doing, are affecting the Earth and the core and the weather, the earthquakes, the volcanoes. Everything is related to this. So no matter what the disaster is, whether it's a volcano erupting, whether it's crazy weather, whether it's an earthquake, it's all related to what's happening with the sun. And I think they are preparing for something because they know what's going on. I mean, if I know, I mean, with my little, I have so little access to, I mean, I basically have public access to all the information. I basically use the magnetopause reversers to calculate the position of this object. It's what's available to me. Don't forget, they have incredible resources to find out exactly where these objects are. They have been studying them for years. I mean, I'm just discovering what they are capable of and how they interact. But they've been studying this for years. They know exactly how these objects act.
So this would be a good idea, though. This would be a good idea for them to have all of the alphabet soup agencies in place.
Yes.
In place in a major city such as New York City, that would be, you know, if something would occur, again, a massive power outage.
Yes.
You know, I was speaking with a person, a good friend of mine, yesterday and also the day before, and her son, he works for the emergency management team in the state of New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
And he specifically told his mother on Saturday afternoon, whenever he got back home, he went to her house and he told her, he said, "Mom, you better prepare for a long-term power outage. This is what is happening right now." And they were reporting also on the night of the I believe it was the 22nd of April, that 48 meteors burned up in the sky over the east coast of the United States. 48 meteors overnight. Wow. And this is what was being talked about between emergency management officials and people from the Army, the United States military, and the Air Force. So the possibilities of, okay, what are they looking at? Are they looking at a solar event, or are they looking at a deep impact, or the possibilities of both?
Yeah, because what happens is when these brown dwarf stars come in, they don't come in alone. They come in with whatever's orbiting them. So it could be planets. Planets are not really a problem because planets seem to repel each other. But they have debris around them. In other words, rocks, asteroids. And these things are dangerous. They come in sort of behind and orbiting around these brown dwarf stars. And as they cross Earth's orbit, they can be perturbed, and they can move in all sorts of directions. So that's the danger that we are facing.
Well, if they would be, if they would be that close, then we would have absolutely no warning. One of these could be slingshot right into the path of Earth's orbit. This would be absolutely tragic. Now, after I received the information from my friend in Jersey, I decided to see if I could find out and confirm through the NASA webcams that do point at the sky and do record the meteors. And lo and behold, on the night of the 22nd, I counted 48 meteors burning up in the sky. So, you know, at least I know that information was correct. And, you know, earlier this morning, me and you, we spoke about all of these volcanoes that are within our oceans that nobody knows about. There are about 1 million of them that are in the oceans.
Yeah.
And your take on the heating up of the oceans around the world is directly attributed to these underwater volcanoes. And that is also affecting weather patterns around the world.
Yeah. Yes, so I spoke to you about that because what's happening is as the mantle warms up, then the lava rises up, and the crust is very thin on where the oceans are. So we get lots and lots of volcanoes on the ocean floor. And of course, as the pressure builds, these volcanoes are erupting. So the ocean is obviously warming up because this is very hot lava coming to the surface and heating up the oceans from the bottom. So this causes the oceans to warm up. And when the oceans warm up, you get more evaporation. So then you get more moisture in the air, more cloud. This is what happens. Yeah, so this is part of the weather chaos that we are experiencing. It affects everything. The fact that the mantle's warming up, it affects the temperature of the oceans. It affects the amount of moisture in the air, and then we get more cloud cover. But the cosmic radiation will increase our cloud cover as well, and so we will get more rain, and so on. But I wanted to mention as well that it seems that the Earth has an asteroid defense system. So they seem to have these either laser or plasma discharge weapons that actually can destroy some of these asteroids. That's part of this technology that they use outside of Earth's orbit. They don't want us to know about. So they have the devices that hide these objects from us, and they seem to have these type of weapons that also blow up some of the asteroids. They use the same sort of technology to power, from what I've studied, some of the devices. So I'm not surprised that they do that. But don't forget, if an asteroid is large enough, I don't think these weapons will be effective. So it's only for a certain range of sizes. So the small ones, they let come right through because they burn up in the atmosphere. If one is large enough, like the one in Russia, I think, when was in 2013? I'm not sure anymore.
Yeah, 2013.
Yeah, that one was destroyed by one of those weapons. That's why it would have impacted if it hadn't been destroyed in the air. So they used one of those weapons on it, I think.
Yeah, because
I
always thought that was kind of funny how that asteroid, as big as it was able to make its way all the way through the atmosphere, and then all of a sudden 15 miles above the surface of the Earth, it explodes over a pretty much uninhabited area near a frozen lake.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe they used one of their weapons on it. They do have weapons like that. It's like a defense weapon for the Earth. They do have them. But like I said, if an asteroid is really, really huge, they will not work. And so I actually find it funny that NASA keeps thinking of sending out these nuclear weapons out there. I mean, it has to be some kind of joke, because obviously they have these weapons that are much more powerful than any thermonuclear reaction that they may use to blow up these objects. So it's interesting that they have this. They have certain things that they're always trying to hide from us, and yet it becomes obvious when they start using them.
Yeah, and it's all of our money. It's our money that they're paying for all of these weapons. So, we should have access to them.
Exactly.
One of the last questions that I wanted to ask you. So, I mean, I am really, really starting to get on board almost 100% that they are definitely trying to cover up a solar event, even if it was just a massive power outage. Because as I was told yesterday and on Saturday, one of their big fears during a massive power outage in a massive city like New York would be crime and rioting and complete civil unrest, because people would take advantage of the opportunity of nothing working, no cell phones, no computers, no electricity, total darkness, and they would take advantage of the situation, and then people would panic. So we're not saying that, the Earth is going to be destroyed during this solar event, because a solar event could entail a lot of things, from a geomagnetic storm, a solar flare, these power outages, increased earthquake activity, volcanic activity, weather chaos. So, I mean, we're pretty much in the dark, no pun intended, dealing with the sun here, but we are kind of at the mercy of the government right now, because they do know what's happening.
Yes.
And if it wasn't for people like us and like BP Earthwatch and Suspicious Observers and a couple of other channels out there that are actually reporting on what is truly happening to the sun, we wouldn't know anything. We'd be walking around just doing our day-to-day, and we wouldn't know what the hell's going on until it actually happened. And then no one is prepared. You know, nobody has power. You know, you don't have any money. You don't have enough food. You don't have enough water. You may not have enough of your medications if you need that to survive. And wow, we would be in some serious trouble.
That's right.
My God.
I think you're right, Scott. I think that if there is a huge power outage in a large city, that the problem is civil unrest and crime, which is why they may be wanting to get the army into the area to keep things under control.
Oh boy. Well, I mean, I already made my trip to the bank this morning. I withdrew enough money for a long-term situation. And, as soon as we are finished with our live stream, I'm going to pick up additional candles and additional supplies, and just going to keep them on hand, because it's better to be prepared than not to be prepared. Yes, because if something does happen to our power grid on the East Coast, the majority of the time it's something that they just don't flip a switch and it's all okay. Everybody has lights again. In a situation like this, the sun can absolutely destroy a power grid, and they're not going to fix it overnight.
That's right.
And this is what was told to me by many elder Planet X researchers, that when you see these things happening, you're in the beginning. You are in the beginning phases of what's about to happen. And this will not be a one-day event. You'll start to see these events, and they will start to occur. And once they start to occur, you're going to move right through them. And things are not going to get better. They're actually going to get worse. And then they'll get to the point where it's your worst nightmare. And I hope that none of this would ever happen. But the bottom line is, we're seeing all of the signs. It is almost like it is written on a timeline. The events are starting to occur. Like I said, I was told directly that once you see the fake war in the Middle East, that's going to be the beginning. As soon as you see the issues with Israel and Syria and the fake war, then you need to start preparing, because shortly after that, we're going to start to see these problems. And you may even see a banking crisis, which occurs shortly after. And when you see that banking crisis, that's it. That's it. All hell is going to break loose right after that. So, as far as how much time we have, once again, it's something that we're searching for. We're searching for that truth, but they're making it very, very hard for us to get at that truth. But with the help from you, I mean, I have to say that each and every time I come away from a conversation with you, I learned something new. I learned so much that I wish I would have known these things a year ago or 2 years ago, because everything that you've brought forth has helped me tremendously. And I think that you're doing a fantastic service to everyone on this planet that is listening. And hopefully they take the information. You're welcome. But I hope they take the information and they start spreading the word, even though it's making it very, very hard. They made it even harder on me 2 days ago out of nowhere, they suspended my uploading ability to my Planet X Facebook page for 30 days. So now I can't upload any information to our Planet X Facebook page, and I can't upload anything to my own personal page for 30 days. It just came out of nowhere. I don't know. I wasn't given any reason at all from Facebook. I have contacted their offices by email. I have written them, you know, yesterday and the day before. I have checked my email and I have gotten absolutely no explanation whatsoever. So, ladies and gentlemen, if any of you are messaging me on the Planet X News or even my personal Facebook page, I can't answer you because they have suspended my privileges for messaging and uploading anything on Facebook. So welcome to another government social media platform.
That's terrible.
Yeah, exactly. So,
yes,
you know, they're going to continue. They're going to continue making it harder. I'm very, very surprised that they haven't interfered even more, but I think they have their hands full with what is exactly going on. But I don't know. We're just going to have to wait it out, and we're going to have to see how things progress. And I'll be very honest with you. For the first time, I'm very worried about this next week. I did see some very odd weather patterns coming in over the course of this week coming up over the period of the next 5 to 7 days. And, you know, with this.
Yeah, Scott, I just wanted to mention one thing, and that was that we just were, we were facing that large coronal hole just like something like 24 hours ago. And then what happens is the fast solar wind then starts impacting Earth. And I think it's supposed to start impacting Earth today.
Yes.
So when that fast solar wind starts impacting Earth, then that's when we can expect definitely something to happen. The earthquakes, the weather patterns go a little bit more crazy than usual. From today, I think we can expect something to happen. Also with that, the brown dwarf star going in towards the sun, then we can definitely expect something major to happen on the sun. So that's why we are now in a higher alert kind of time.
Yeah, most definitely. There is no doubt. So, you know, in closing, Christopher, are you still with us? I think he might have stepped away from his mic. But in closing, though, Doctor, you know, I wish you the best in this this time coming up here, and hopefully we could all, you know, hopefully we could all make it through this, and hopefully maybe this is just a drill. But there's too many. Yeah, there are just way too many coincidences that this is smelling like rotten, dirty fish. Yes. And the smell's coming from the government once again. And you know, sometimes I can see things their way, that they don't want to create a panic. But I believe in the truth, and I believe the way that you speak to people, the way that you explain things, you get a better result. Because if something happens, and the people in this country, if they find out once again that their government deceived them, all hell's going to break loose. We already went through this crap with 9/11. We all know that they had everything to do with the World Trade Center, you know, bringing those trade centers down. We know that they do things that are definitely not too damn cool. But I could see them doing something like this, because this whole Operation Gotham Shield, it just stinks like hell. That much is a fact. But in closing, did you have anything else that you'd like to say?
No, I'd just like to thank you for this lovely conversation and for allowing me to tell people the truth.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. You know, and once again, just so all these troll babies out there that, you know, you sit back and you ramble on and you become a naysayer, but one day soon, you will find out that everything that we're trying to do and you're trying to stop is going to come back and bite you right in the ass. And there's not going to be anybody that's going to be on your side, and you're going to be left out there alone. And I just wanted to also say that, you know, the other day we put out an offer to Mr. Logan Runnin. He's the king of truth. Well, we put an offer out there to him days ago for him to have the opportunity to jump on board, have me on his show, have Chris Potter and the physicist. Let's all get out there and let's talk. You're the king of truth, but it seems like you put up nothing but smut and you put up nothing but lies, and you don't want to get to the truth. Well, the offer still stands. The offer still stands. And you now have 2 days. Logan Runnin, you have 2 days to respond to my, well, I'm calling you out, brother. I'm calling you out in front of all of your troll friends. Step up to the plate, be a man, and let's do this interview. Let's do it. Because you know deep down inside that you're not qualified to step up to the plate, and you do not have the qualifications to even step into the arena with the likes of our physicist and our doctor. But just to shut all of you up, we're willing to go ahead and go for it, but you have 48 hours. Logan Runnin. And before we go ahead and end, I see my man Chris Potter has just come back into the loop. Where are you at, brother?
I'm here.
Go ahead, buddy. Fire away.
Well, I didn't have anything to share other than, you know, the trolls don't have anything on us and they really need to go their own way. And I really don't want to have to go to the Oregon Starbucks today.
Well, listen, if you go there, if you go to the Oregon Starbucks to manhandle that scum tech, you have to make sure that you have a really, really thick pair of those yellow dishwashing latex gloves. You may even want to wear a body condom because you don't want to get none of that scum on you. And here's the last thought. It's not even worth your time, brother, because your time is entirely too precious for the people out there that are listening to you, me, and the doctor. Bottom line.
Right, buddy. Yeah, and I think it's pretty fruitless for some of these people to keep emailing the university because the university has an active investigation, and the idiots that keep emailing her are a part of the investigation. They still don't get that yet.
Yeah, I have to agree. They're pretty stupid. And you know, once again, here you go, ladies and gentlemen. You know, you got this this individual. I don't know. He's like one of these runs on his own debunker. He's a real pain in the ass. Goes by the YouTube channel name, I think WAP Tech or something like that. But there he is. You know, he wants to harass the doctor. And what is he going to prove? I mean, he's not going to step up to the plate and have any debate with her because, number one, he doesn't have the education. And number two, he doesn't have Wi-Fi or internet access, but only when he goes to his local Starbucks. And the same thing goes with Mr. Logan Runnin. hey, he's the king of truth. That's what his title is, the king of truth. But yet he just dishes out nothing but lies and half-truths and doesn't get to the bottom of any story. He only tells the side of the story that the trolls present him. And they basically use Logan as a puppet. And we all know what Dazza the cameraman did to Logan, and he basically let Logan out to dry, and Logan lost his YouTube channels, and Logan suffered because he got involved with the wrong people. Logan used to investigate Nibiru and Planet X, and then they put a chip in him. And when they put the chip in the king of truth, they turned the chip on, and they screwed him over. And now he's a robot. He's a cyborg.
I love it.
Woo! That's
agreed. All I have to say to finish up is that I'm really happy that the physicist has had some of her papers seriously reviewed and submitted. And yet another argument that we can knock down. There's very few arguments that the opposition has that has any credibility or weight of anything substantial. These people harass us. That's all they do. They don't have anything coming up to the plate with real information, and that's it. They're losers, and these people need to actually go get real jobs. Where some of us like me who actually work from home and YouTube is a second job, folks like Grease Tech ain't got nothing. That's all I got.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. You know, and ladies and gentlemen, I just want to thank each and every one of you and everyone who supports my channel and supports Chris's channel and also supports the doctor and her reports and her findings. And you know, after reading the comments and going through emails again and reading what all of you have to say, you know, 99% of it is very, very touching because, you know, we've all kind of formed this kind of circle, even though none of us may ever meet each other. We don't know each other on a personal level, but deep down inside, we've all touched each other in, you know, a very dramatic way. And, you know, through the grace of God, we'll all get through this, hopefully, but we have to stand tall. We have to keep our chins up. And, you know, mostly we have to be prepared. You have to be prepared for anything because these governments and space and the sun and the weather, well, bottom line, they can throw anything at us at any time. And the bottom line, again, is they don't want you to be prepared. They are actually looking for loss of life. They want to decrease the numbers. But it's not going to happen because we're going to stand tall. We're going to stand together. And if we have to, well, in the end, we'll fight for our lives because that's what the human species does. We fight for our lives. Well, Doctor, I really appreciate you being with us once again. This report absolutely blew me away, and I now have a better understanding, and you have answered so many questions that I had for almost a year. And I definitely, you know, I thank you for that. My eyes are wide open right now. I hope everybody else has their eyes wide open. You may not have understood everything that was presented here, but this video will be up on my YouTube channels. It will be up on Chris's YouTube channel, so you can freely go back and watch the video comfortably and hopefully start to understand what we are under the threat of, because we are truly under the threat of something. And the doctor is defining it, and she is explaining it to the best of her knowledge. You don't go to any other YouTube channel and get this type of information. You get a picture show. And we're trying to utilize all of this information so we can help and we can do the right thing. So please, by all means, stay tuned. And whenever you see a live stream coming up with the physicist on board, please make sure you pay attention and get on board with us. And we will try to definitely bring you the truth. This is Scott from Planet X News, Chris Potter, and our doctor and professor of physics. We thank all of you very, very much for tuning in.